Hey everybody, welcome to the show live. Critical Q&A number 467. Let's answer some questions. Actually, let's go ahead and let me get the little Q&A set up here while we get rolling and people show up here. Melissa is fine. She's actually out and about right now doing some errands and living the best life. So that's cool. Let's see here. Please post your questions here. All right. Start Q&A. All right, good. So now I can see your Q&A questions there, and then let's flip over so we can see the chat on the screen as well, so I might have some idea of what you guys are going on about while I'm answering your questions here. I try to monitor both, but I mostly keep my attention on the question Q&A box that I have here in front of me, so that when your questions come in, I can address those. But if you want to, drop in any non-question comments, super chats, things like that, go ahead and do that in the regular comment section. But if you have questions for me, throw them under that post there where I said, please post your questions here. I cannot believe it is September 1st either. This month really snuck up on me. I was really hoping to be farther along. Of course, on my writing project, it's going great. I've got a lot of stuff laid out. It's all, there's a lot of chapters. I don't know how specific I want to get about it, but I will tell you guys a little bit about it. I'm writing a book. It is about cult recovery. It is going well. I have gone through and sort of combed through a lot of the material that I've already put out there for you over the years on my YouTube channel, and I've made sure that that's getting in there. I've literally gone through all the podcasts where we ever talked about cult recovery and sort of pulled everything out of those. And I'm now researching other books and material, academic papers, books people have written, things like that on the topic. Fortunately for me, it's not like there's, volumes and volumes of this. This is a very, very niche field, cult recovery, and it shouldn't be, because the same kinds of concepts that apply to cult recovery apply to domestic violence recovery, gang recovery, trafficking recovery, trauma recovery. There's so much that is, sort of crossed over on the Venn diagram of overlapping needs. And so it sounds like it's this super niche thing, but most of what goes on in cult recovery isn't super niche, but there is certainly specialized aspects of it that have to be paid attention to when you're undoing, the cult leader dynamic, and when you're undoing the group dynamic and things like that. There's unique challenges and situations presented by cults that aren't presented by predatory spouses or, traffickers or something. There's the methods of control are similar, but the dynamics and the specifics of it can be quite different for individuals and their experience, especially the second gens who are raised with this stuff and basically have the cult model or views or world perspective. That's their normal. That's what they literally grow up with thinking is normal. So lot to talk about there. Yeah, great. Glad you're here, Joe. Glad everybody could be here live to join for this. We're just going to keep doing this. I do want to ask you all a favor, as I do from time to time. I haven't pimped or promoted or really done a whole lot of anything with my channel as far as that goes, talking to you guys. I just have been throwing out a lot of content, not promoting a lot. But I do want your help. The best way possible to spread or grow a channel is positive word of mouth. And if y'all, like my work, and so many of you have been such long-term, steady Eddie followers of mine, and it really warms my heart, help me grow the channel by sharing this around on social media and, letting people know what an awesome person I am and that kind of thing. That'd be great. Thank you. I will also remind everybody there is a book about the subject of Scientology that I've already written. It's right here, Scientology A to Xenu. You can check that out if you have questions about Scientology, and most people who come to my channel do. Well, it's all in here. There's so much in here. I will also remind everybody that I have a Critical Clips channel, a whole different YouTube channel. This week, I think I dropped like clip 1400 or 1300 or something. Like, there's a lot of answers to questions you have on my other YouTube channel, where I've just extracted those answers out of earlier Q&A shows mostly, but also extracted some stuff from earlier podcasts too. So I'd encourage you to subscribe to that channel. Check that out. That posts Monday through Friday, so you get an individual little clip every day. And that's kind of fun because miscellaneous questions come up all the time about cult stuff. What about the Scientology specific stuff with the ARC triangle or sect checking or the E-meter or the TRs, or how coercive control works, or who were L. Ron Hubbard's kids and what were they all about, or what was the deal with Mary Sue, and what's the Guardian's office and how is it different from the Office of Special Affairs. These are just a few of the things that I have laid out in some detail in answers to various questions on that channel. So just totally gonna promote that. And then the last thing I want to throw out for you all is my Patreon page. It's still there, it's still active, and I could really use your support if you're enjoying my channel or the work that I'm doing. I'm fan funded 100%. The only reason I can keep doing this is because of you guys. Seriously. And I'm honestly gotten down to the point where I'm barely doing that. So, it would be great if I could get some more support in that sense. Okay. And finally, the last thing I want to say, I'm just front loading all the stuff. Usually I wait till the end, but I'm going to do this at the beginning this time. The last thing I'll put out there for you guys is that I do personal consultations, one-on-one with anybody who wants to contact me and get assistance with a cult situation. Maybe your friends, maybe your family are involved in a cult. You don't know what to do. You don't know what to say. You don't know how to deal with it. Maybe you've already screwed it up in some way. Maybe I can help sort it out. Maybe I can help you with dealing with that. Also, of course, for those who are in a post-cult, you've been in a situation, coercion, abuse, there's trauma, you don't know what to do. I'm not a licensed therapist. I'm not going to treat you, but I can help you. I can direct you to people. I can give you education, assistance. I can listen with an understanding ear and just shut the fuck up and just let you talk. There's a lot of things I can do to help. So you can contact me for that. All right, now let's get on with your questions. We've got them coming into the Q&A box here, so let's go ahead and start getting them up on the screen. Let's start with the first one. Let me see if I can get to it here. Sometimes there's a little bit of trouble getting to the top one. Let me see if I can. Yeah, okay. Here we go. Oh, I see why I'm not getting this properly. My bad. My bad. Here it is. Just waiting for it to pop up on screen there. So, there it is. What do you think of so many ancient cultures that had contact sharing a flood myth? Is that idea overblown, perhaps? Oh, what a great question. Thanks for asking me about this. Now, this reminds me actually of something I was thinking about this week. This exact question, in fact, came up in something I was reading with something to do with Christian apologetics, I think, if I remember right. And there was a statement that there's this idea that that they all have this flood myth, and some of them do, but not all of them, not by any stretch. There's a lot of myth information when it comes to flood stories and stuff, and I'm not an expert on this at all, so I'm just commenting off my, little bit of knowledge about this. I think the idea is overblown. If you think about life on planet Earth thousands of years ago, If you think about, if you really apply yourself to what were we doing, human beings, there were a lot less of us. We were kind of dispersed and, separated. Nomadic, I understand, tribal, right? Until we start settling down and then, growing things. And then we're paying a lot more attention to agriculture and water and seasons and, and being near rivers or lakes or, water sources and fertile soil and, all these things that you got to pay attention to in order to build a community in a spot where you're going to stay. You're not going to roam around. This is thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years of our evolution figuring this out. It's a long, long stretch of time. And in all of that time, if you think about all the different cultures that are developing, all the different tribes all over the world that are doing this process, Europe, Africa, right? Asian subcontinent, Asia. Over all those hundreds and thousands of years that this was going on, do you think it might be possible that every one of these groups of people might have been flooded out once or twice? Probably, and develop myths and stories around it. Of course, just like everything else, right? And what do so many of our religious stories come out of are these old ideas of, the fables and myths that developed over time. These things are like the phone game. They develop and change over time, and they get blown up. They become mythical. They become, especially when you're talking about assigning these events to deities, to gods interfering. Which was, a very, very common and easy to understand interpretation of the world if you don't have any science or any knowledge of how things really work. And for thousands and thousands of years, people didn't. They were utterly clueless about anything that we know so much about now. So much that we take for granted now, actually, because all of us don't know so much about all of this, but you know what I mean. Okay, so anyway, stories around the campfire. Exactly. Like, how does this stuff get passed? Well, it gets passed through written, oral tradition, and it's going to be the telephone game. There is not one myth, not one, I guarantee you, that sounds anything like it was originally told. If we can't get the news right from 3 months ago, if we as human beings right now argue violently over the interpretation of January 6th, which was an obvious event that was obvious in intent and action, and we can't agree on that because there's a ton of people out there who are just so in their cult that they can't think about it as anything other than what it wasn't, and that was a couple years ago. And you're going to tell me that events that were just as significant to the people who were living them at the time and over time, that we're getting the straight scoop thousands of years later? Come on. Give me a break. So that's, so as far as sharing the flood myth, the idea being overblown, yes, it is. It is a very overblown idea, overblown by Christians and people who want to believe in the universal flood myth and the universal, one God story thing. They're going to push that and push that and push that, and they're not going to listen to, and therefore they're not going to pass on to their kids and following generations any information that contradicts their version of reality. This is human beings, right? 101. So that's why I am absolutely positive that the idea is overblown, because there isn't any evidence in the physical world for a universal flood that wiped out all of humanity except for a small group of people that God chose to put on an ark and save. There's no evidence of that. So that's why it's overblown, right? Because there's lots of evidence for lots of things. And if people in the religious world who are so into denying science and castigating non-believers, if any of those people would take the time to actually dig in, and some of them do, okay? Don't get me wrong. I'm talking about the hardcore guys now, of course, the cult guys. I wish they would do this, right? Because the people who do, like Ben Kramer, like Reverend Ben Kramer, the guy I had on a couple weeks ago, right? Great guy. I mean, this is a guy who's not going to argue with me about this. Like, if they would do the research, they would find out how much sciencing has been done on these things. And it's impressive. You know, when you really dig into geology and geography and what they know, man, it's amazing what they're able to figure out. So, so yeah, there isn't any evidence of that. And that's why I just go back and go, nope, didn't happen. Okay, enough about that. Let's carry on. Robert Tobias, as a YouTube content creator, do you think YouTube is going overboard by disallowing certain words? Yes, I do. I cannot stand it. I absolutely despise YouTube's moderation and content creation policies. They are efforts to control. And the reason I'm pissed about it is sort of pissed by proxy, because it hasn't happened to me a lot, but I've seen it happen to other people. And I believe it hasn't happened to me a lot only because I have a tiny little channel that YouTube doesn't pay a lot of attention to. Once you start getting bigger, the algorithm pays more attention to you. What I have seen from that are efforts to educate about the bad stuff is algorithmically corralled in with the bad stuff. And so when you're keying in on only the words and not the concepts or ideas that are being discussed, then you relegate really, really good content to the trash bin because it's using words that the algorithm has deemed inappropriate, unacceptable, and we're not going to let it happen. So yeah, that kind of crap really, really, really annoys me. This whole facade of AI really needs to come crashing down. We do not have machines that are artificially intelligent. We have text generation devices that mimic intelligence, but they are not intelligent any more than a light bright or an Etch-a-Sketch is intelligent. It's just mimicking things that are fed into it. There's no understanding of those concepts, and therefore these algorithms that plow through video content looking for egregious, censorious material are not thinking machines. And YouTube is such an incredibly large, monstrous platform that there aren't enough human beings to hire, I guess, for them to be able to, filter all the content that gets uploaded through a human being, who then, of course, is going to have all kinds of other issues with bias and filters and problems and all the things that people bring to the problem. So, AI isn't a perfect solution, and neither is people only. A good combination of those things is how you would really want to do this. But YouTube's priority isn't about truth or about censorship, rules, or about anything like that. YouTube doesn't care about any of that. As a corporation, they don't give a shit. And if I sound a little harsh about that, it's because I've been a YouTuber for 10 years and I've watched them do this, right? And I have a very, very, very low opinion of YouTube. I'm on this platform by necessity only. It's the only way to reach you guys. But I hate it. This platform sucks. As a content creator, we get ripped off. We get way too many ads in our content that distract you guys, which upsets me to no end. And I think I get more upset about it than you guys do. And we get screwed over, right, on how much money we make and the percentages and all that, right, on everything, on every level of this. We are getting screwed over. And it's only been getting worse. And YouTube is a platform that is all about making money only. That's all they care about. So any idea that YouTube has any sort of moral activist kind of thing going on, no, they don't. No, they don't. They are only in it for the raw money. And all of their policies, especially with the current CEO and the last CEO who resigned, these guys are just a total money whores. That's all that they're there for. So this platform is sort of the, lesser evil, I guess, is why I stay here. But yeah, they are going way overboard on this because they don't want to. Yeah, I think I've made my point. Yeah, I don't think I need to go into it any more than that. Let's carry on with some more questions here. Okay, ex-Scientology asked me a Scientology-related question here. Ethics actions for being late. What would happen if you were late to muster in the Sea Org and if you were late often? Okay, good. Okay, so you're specifically asking about the Sea Org. So the discipline in the Sea Org is harsher than it is at the staff level or at the public level, for sure. And in the Sea Org, if you're late to muster, you're going to get called out. The ethics officer is going to talk to you after and find out why, and maybe you'll be forced to do a condition, like a danger condition or something like that. Bypass habits and normal routines is the condition of danger, right? Handle the situation in danger in it. Find out what you're doing that's out ethics and use self-discipline to correct it, get honest and straight. And formulate and adopt firm policy that will hereafter detect and prevent the same situation from continuing to occur. I can't believe I can still recite that shit. So that's the danger formula, and you'll be made to do something like that in writing. Do those steps so as to handle why it was that you were late, because they'll tell you that being late to muster is putting yourself into a dangerous situation. Now, if you do that and you keep being late, and let's say it's your fourth time or something being late, you're walking in the middle of fucking muster, right? And it's like everybody's standing there and there's like 100 people there, looking at you. I mean, it's not, being late to muster ain't fun. No, it never happened to me. Anyway. So then you're going to get a harsh talking to, probably by a senior person, maybe even the CO, right? They're just going to get sick of your shit, right? It's going to be like, hey, what the fuck, right? You need to knock this shit off. Ethics officer, right? Deal with this guy. And then you're going to have lower conditions. Now you're going to be, non-existence, liability. You're starting to show like, enemy colors is how they would put it. They don't want to put up with this. And so also, of course, if you're late to the point that you're really not showing up at all, the MAA has to go to your room and roust you up. So they're not down with that, right? They don't, that pisses them off because they pretty much daily have to go do that with somebody, since they're in an organization, with the CLO, the organization I was in, we had a muster, there were 150 people there, right? Sometimes up to 200. Statistically speaking, someone's going to screw up almost daily. And yeah, that kind of how it was working. Anyway, so they got to go roust you and get you and all that. So yeah, if it's a repeating situation, you're going to get lower conditions where you're going to have a liability formula or a doubt formula or an enemy formula, something like that. You're going to have to do, and off you go, right? Yeah, dangerous to catch in these hands. That's right. Oh, okay. So there we go with that. Yeah, I think you guys get that I'm giving you my true opinions about things. Okay. By the way, I wanted to give you guys a little treat real fast. Come here, buddy. Hey, come on. Come here. That's right. Everybody wants to see you. You're gonna have a little bonus Benson cam today. Hey, buddy. He's sitting here down below my feet, so I thought I'd share him with you. Mel's out doing a little shopping. So he likes to hang out with me. So he's just chilling here under the desk, so I thought I'd throw him up there. Okay, let's carry on. Oh my God, frustrated. If it's how much would chuck if woodchuck could do it. Moving right along. OBG Foster, do questions from these Q&As pop into your mind during the week? Is there a pattern to which ones stay with you? Yes. Okay. That's an interesting question. Oh, wow. That's an interesting question. Do they stay with me? The only times that I feel that when in the middle of the week, I get questions emailed to me and I'll throw them into my queue. And then on Sunday, before the show, I put it all together and throw the questions up. I do have some questions we didn't get to last week, which I hope, which we'll get to this week. But as far as answers, or do questions from these Q&As, do questions from these Q&As pop into your mind during the week? No, but sometimes new answers do. And maybe that's what you're asking me, because this question is a little funny, but I'll just answer that one. Yes, I do get answers to questions. I don't have questions occur to me, but I do have answers occur to me that I didn't answer. And I always like, I had one of those moments, right? I could have had a V8, right? I was like, I should have said this. And it will generally, is there a pattern to it? I can't think of a pattern to the kinds of questions or answers that would that pop into my mind during the week. But what does happen is I will feel rueful or regretful, right, about not thinking about some aspect of an answer or a different, sort of tack on an answer that that would have been a better answer, right? That kind of thing. It's a general question, so I'm giving you a general answer. I can't think of any super specifics right now, but there aren't repeating patterns in this that I can spot. There's not subjects or issues or something that come up that make me, that I think of, I should, it's not like that. It's pretty random. Yeah, I don't know. Carry on here. You guys ask great questions. I really do love your questions. Oh, okay. Here's a good question. Stuart Gorman asks, how common do you think culty nations have been throughout human history? Something like North Korea, but in history or prehistory. How would we recognize them, or what would they have gotten up to? Okay. You're using the word culty, and it's a good word to use, but I think when I think about nations, nation states, countries through history, I think of monarchies. I think of an awful lot of authoritarianism, right? My way or the highway kind of thinking by the leadership who feels emboldened. It seems to me, certainly in European history and I suppose Asian history, when we look at the Khans and the Chinese dynasties, that India, even my basic knowledge of Indian history, it's really not extensive. Africa, tribal nations. The pattern is always the pattern, right? There's a leader or leadership, and there are followers, or there are the people under them who are, being directed on what to do, with a military component to enforce their will, some kind of a finance system in place or economic system in place. And through most of our history, as I understand it, we've had and lived under pretty authoritarian systems most of the time. Right? Leaders who are very much about themselves and their families, because that's who they can trust to distribute the power to, because they can't trust all these other people who are just trying to take power from them. So monarchies and dynasties would tend to be the pattern that would arise out of this. And these are very, very entitled people. The first gen of any authoritarian monarchy or dynasty or anything is the guys who made it happen. And they had to go spill the blood and do the work and conquer and all that crap, right? And most of the time they spent their whole lives doing it. And then their kids, may or may not fuck it up. And here we go, right? On the merry-go-round of, is this going to be a beneficent monarchy, or is this going to be a totalitarian Nero, horror show? And you never know what you're going to get. It's always a dice roll depending on, how screwed up the leadership is. and the problems of state and how educated they are in handling and knowing about and dealing with the problems of state, you know, economics, foreign affairs, military, all of it, right? This is the whole package. And it's on your plate whether you're competent or not as the leader. So when you're not competent, and very few people in history are, and when it comes to leadership, it's a hard job. No one ever said it was easy. It's easier to be a cult leader than it is to be a beneficent monarch. It's easier to be authoritarian than it is to be democratic. It's easier to rule your people with an iron hand and an iron fist, right, than it is to give them rights and freedoms and let them get on with it. It's always easier to be the asshole. Always. Because all you need is might, ultimately. And might is right. And that equation works out for every human group. At the end of the day, the guy who can beat the crap out of everybody else is the guy who gets to say what everybody's going to do. Unless you have a group of people who just aren't going to put up with that. And then the group force doesn't allow that to happen. But that's very few and far between. So for the most part, people kowtow to the bully. And so the bully ends up being the one in charge. And so it's been very common in human history, as I see it, to have these cult of personality style government systems built up around glorifying the individual or family that is in charge. I see that pattern over and over again in history. You know, so how do you recognize them? Well, all the earmarks of authoritarianism, right? They're all there, right? You have an oppressed society. You have people whose rights and privileges, as we understand them in America, we are probably one of the most privileged nations that has ever lived in history. The United States in the last few hundred years has enjoyed rights and freedoms as a citizenship that very, very few citizens in history have enjoyed. And we do not see that as a body, especially the younger generations. They're always taking so much for granted that is just handed to them, and they want more and more and more, because that's human nature, right? It's never good enough. I always want more. And they don't know how good they have it, right? And we see that over and over again. Yeah. So that's, I don't know. I'm rambling a little bit maybe, but that's my bigger view. Is it's kind of like if you ask me, well, do we see how common are culty nations in history? I kind of go, which ones weren't, not which ones were. It is kind of how I see it, right? If you don't have the Catholic Church ruling Europe, if you don't have, you know, Genghis Khan being a complete fucking asshole, right, to everybody, and just mountains of skulls. I mean, it's like, who are these people? They're barbaric monsters. That's who they are. Who comes up with the Inquisition? Monsters do, right? And these have been the people that have been in charge of us for way too much of human history. You know, so when we finally get it good, we can't screw it up fast enough. It's so frustrating to me. But that's, you know, that's kind of what I have to say about that. Is I think that more often than not, we find culty authoritarian government structures. And when we can break away from that, we still complain that that's what we live under, right? So in a way, I say all this and rant about all of this, but at the same time, there was probably an awful lot of people in history who were good people, trying to do good things, trying to be beneficent dictators, you know, and running into all the problems of state and not, you know, and having that problem, right? So it's not all just the rot at the top that causes all of this. It's all ends of this that cause this. And, you know, of course, corruption and abuses of power, you know, we can find dime a dozen examples of that. Okay. I feel like I'm just ranting right now, so I'm going to carry on. Thanks for asking me the question, though. Dragon's Victory. Do you think most, if not all, religious leaders, particularly founders of religions, are neurotypical? Do you kind of have to be in some way? Oh. I think they're not neurotypical. Maybe you meant to word it that way, but I don't. I mean, neurotypical means average, right? Means that you have a brain anatomy that is average, normal, functional, like how we think about how brains work. That's how your brain works. Not being neurotypical is having genetic or other brain issues or neural issues that are not typical, and that causes all kinds of interesting things to happen with us. Lots of interesting things, from temporal lobe epilepsy to frontal lobe damage to ADHD to a host of non-neurotypical conditions. And a few of those, especially when we start looking at things like temporal lobe epilepsy or certain brain conditions, can cause some very, very interesting ego and perception issues, where one could start thinking of themselves as a deity or as a god or as a supernatural figure, or somehow blessed or touched in such a way that they have access to supernatural channels, mediums, and the spiritualists, right? And the people who do automatic writing or do channeling work. I'd be willing to bet money that the people who became famous doing that in history were one for one not neurotypical. I'll bet you they had something going on that caused them to see or hear or experience whatever it was they were experiencing so strongly, so realistically, that they were able to then communicate about it to others so convincingly and with such certainty, because they themselves were so sure of what happened to them because of their non-neurotypical anatomy. It can really mess with you in significant ways, and that includes, although not everybody who is, I don't mean to imply here that every single person who isn't neurotypical is somehow delusional or full of hallucinations. That's not my point at all. It's not an all or nothing. It's that within that group of non-neurotypical people, you have a set of people who are religiously inclined or spiritually inclined or otherwise, have a belief set that makes them susceptible to interpreting reality through that lens. If they hear voices, if they see things, bright lights, or other hallucinations, or auditory or visual, weirdnesses, their interpretation of it is always in a spiritual, religious, sort of interpretation, right? Story, that narrative. And that's how they're going to talk about it to others. And that's how and again, the amount of certainty and personal, commitment they bring to whatever conversations they're having with others, they can convince them that they are right or true. And that's how we get these religions, as they start with one person and they start talking to other people, right? And often they are a sign of the times, because you could say things to people in 1910 or 1920 that could be very convincing for a person who lived in 1910 or 20, right? Doesn't know about electricity, doesn't know about jets, doesn't know about the moon, doesn't know about space travel, doesn't know about electronics, doesn't know about any of this stuff. And so, you're going to give them some interpretation, and they're going to, oh yeah, that absolutely makes sense. And away we go, right? So again, it depends not just on their brain anatomy as to whether they're going to be able to start a religion or not, but how certain they are about communicating it, their skills with that, and their ability to form an organization and keep it together, enough for it to last. That all has to be part of the cult leader's playbook too. It's not just having these crazy ideas and getting people to believe it. It's holding them together long enough to build something too. All right. Anyway, X-Cyan, what is Gish Gallop? Are you looking forward to the debate? Okay, I'm not actually sure which debate you're referring to. I can think of a couple right now that I've been hearing about on stuff. Yo, neurodivergent. Thank you, Dragons of Victory, for clarifying that. Yeah, we were good. Okay, so Gish Gallop is a debate technique. It's something that is, if you could clarify which debate you're talking about, though, I want to be sure I'm getting where you're coming from, because the thing I think of course, is Trump-Harris debate. And I'm pretty sure that's what you're referring to, but just confirm that for me. So, sorry, Gish Gallop. You overwhelm the person and the audience with with a string or a litany of facts delivered one after another, after another, after another, after another. It's usually about 4 or 5 or 6. Bam, bam, bam. And before your opponent can start responding to the first one, you're out with the second and the third and the fourth. It's an overwhelming communication tactic designed to disperse attention, confuse your opponent and the audience, and get yourself out of situations that you don't want to be in as a debater. It's a dishonest debate tactic. If you're engaged in debate in order to actually exchange ideas and engage with those ideas substantively, then Gish Galloping is bullshit. But if you're in a debate to publicly get the perception that you're winning, you use it all the time. And this is why, Ben Shapiro, who's famous for this, will use this as a constant winning tactic, is you just overwhelm and you come across sounding smart, looking smart, feeling like you're the fucking bomb, but you're actually just being a dick, right? I'm being really harsh here, but I really, really hate people that do this. I've seen it in the ex-Scientology world. I've seen it in the cult world. I've seen cult leaders do it. It's a tactic. It's a communication tactic to shut down people with uncertainty and overwhelm. It's purposeful every single time it's done. And like I said, dishonest, kind of, what would you call this? I mean, I can use words like dishonest, but so many people are on board with this that words like that don't really communicate well, because there's a whole school of thinking out there, especially on social media, that debates are about not engaging substantively. They are about this verbal sparring. And that's a real shame, because you lose an awful lot when debate is a sort of verbal boxing match rather than a discussion. You do. You miss a lot. And I know there's debate clubs and debate tactics and all this sort of thing that builds up around this in schools and stuff. I don't know. I don't see it. I don't see that it's used as, I don't see that debating these days is used as much of a public service. I see it more as a vehicle to fame or something for people, right? And by engaging in stuff like this. And I don't, anyway, not into that. Okay, great. Let's carry on. Where are we at here? Okay, good. Oh, let's go over, before I forget, let's go over to our other question screen and see if we can't pull up a question here. There it is. Okay, from Rochelle. My question is how to make someone aware that they use gaslighting techniques to deflect in situations of conflict. This pertains to a romantic relationship. I have tried to make my partner aware that he does this in arguments, but I struggle to get it across to him. Okay, great question. Education, really, and in terms of how do you do that? Okay, first let me say this, Rochelle, and anybody else who's watching this, who's in this situation or might be in a situation like this. This is a red flag. If you believe that your spouse or partner or someone is trying to or is engaged in gaslighting, let's be super, super clear about what that is. Gaslighting is a repeating pattern of behavior meant to destabilize your sense of reality. It is literally a campaign, premeditated activity, communication and real world stuff that is designed to throw you off, and throw you off like to the point that you are feeling like you are in the twilight zone. You are in a separate reality where things seem not right. Things seem very, very wrong. And you start to question yourself, your own sanity, your own intelligence, your own ability to be rational comes under question because of this campaign of communication and manipulation that's happening to you. Like by manipulation, I mean your partner may be literally moving things in the environment to make you think you forgot where you put stuff and you didn't, but he's or she is messing with you. And they're not messing with you for fun. They're doing it purposefully to get you to question your reality. So that being what gaslighting is, it's not just telling a few lies. So that being clear, if somebody's doing that to you, that's a massive red flag. Like, that's something you should probably get away from. However, if it's a misunderstanding or it's a one-off or a two-off, or it doesn't seem like it's that big of a thing yet, or you're not that bad off yet that you're like literally questioning your own sanity, right? If we're not there yet, it doesn't sound like from your question, Rochelle, that you are, then this is maybe a manageable situation. And the way you manage it is you need to communicate with your partner, your spouse, right? You've got to sit them down and say, look, this is serious and I'm not kidding around, and we're going to have this discussion now. This is this kind of talk. This isn't the kind of thing to mess around with. This isn't the kind of thing to, talk around or sort of hint at. No, don't do that. This is the kind of thing that you need to be blunt and direct about. Because if it's really happening, this is somebody you need to get the hell away from. If it's not really happening, then they need to understand why you think it's happening so they can adjust their behavior accordingly, or you both can adjust your behavior based on whatever it is that's going on that makes it look or feel like there's gaslighting going on. I can't sit here and know one way or the other whether that's really happening or not. But so my advice is sit the person down, pop open Wikipedia, pop open a book, pop open something that explains what gaslighting is. There are wonderful, wonderful videos on YouTube that break this down very exactly. I have stuff that I've done about this, but you can find Dr. Ramani, Rachel Bernstein, other people have put up stuff about this in detail, and it's good stuff. You and your partner need to watch that stuff, and you need to talk about how you talk. How do we react and respond to one another? What's good about it? What's bad about it? What do I like? What do I not like about that? How do we sort out our communication so I don't feel at the end of our conversations that I am always wrong, that somehow I am so wrong that my reality is delusional and I just need to go sit in a corner or something, right, with the dunce cap on? How do we avoid that outcome? Because that's not a positive, healthy outcome, right? That shouldn't be what relationships look like. So however you can confront or deal with or have that conversation, that's what you need to do. I would not mess around with this. If I suspected that my partner was gaslighting me or there was some other manipulation tactic being used, we would be having a very blunt conversation about it. And in fact, over the many years that Mel and I have been together, we have had such conversations because there have been misunderstandings on both of our parts, as happens in any relationship, and we sort it out. And the only way to sort it out is with communication. Not avoiding it, not talking around it, not hinting at it, not, dropping a few subtle clues. No, be blunt about this. That's my best advice for this. Obviously I don't know the situation or context that you are in exactly, but that's what I've, that's my front and center, top of the, line sort of thing I can say. Yeah, I just don't know how else to put it. Don't mess around with it. If I would never for a second put up with anybody doing anything like that to me without, calling them on it. And I suggest that you do the same. Okay, so there we go. Xion, does David Miscavige really have a Facebook page? Do you think he actually makes posts, or would he have a Facebook/social media in charge do it for him, or OSA? I am 100% positive David Miscavige is not on Facebook. That I am sure of. I cannot imagine him sitting around on Facebook ever for any reason. It reminds me a little bit. In fact, I saw a video. Who was in it? Who was that? God, let me look this up because I just saw it like yesterday. So stupid. I can't remember her name. Sorry. But it's just to demonstrate this point here. Selena Gomez. Selena Gomez was on YouTube the other day talking and doing a live stream. And people were sending her super chats. And she didn't know what a super chat was. She didn't know that you could even do that on YouTube. Like, she was like sitting there live going, why are they doing? No, don't. She's telling people, don't do that. I don't need, no, don't do that. Stop sending me money, right? She was like, they do this? This is a thing? This would be David Miscavige on social media. He's clueless. That's the only reason I brought it up, right? He's utterly, like, absolutely out to lunch on this stuff. He doesn't understand it, and he doesn't, and there's no reason for him to want to be part of it. He's not that guy. He's got other stuff he's doing. The world is that guy's oyster as far as, what he gets to spend his time doing, and being on Facebook is not there. So as far as any posts that might show up on David Miscavige's Facebook page, yeah, that's definitely some PR person and OSA doing that for him. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Young Matador. Hey, Chris, any thoughts on the story by Tony that IRS inspectors investigated some orgs over the Chase Wave scandal? Sure. Yeah, I got thoughts on that. It happened. I know it happened. I was informed of it years ago when it was happening. Yeah, it's a thing. It's real. Specifically, I know of Cincinnati, and I believe either Kansas City or St. Louis, but definitely Cincinnati got an IRS visit. Sorry, one second. So yeah, the church. I'm not sure if I'm right about this. I could be totally wrong. This is nothing but my conjecture. But I believe that the IRS is afraid of the Church of Scientology. I believe they are, because of what happened and the struggle of it, right? I believe they're afraid of Scientology in terms of the way you're afraid of the drunk uncle on Thanksgiving. Like, you're not really afraid of this person. This person doesn't, really intimidate you. You just know how much trouble they cause and how upset you get trying to deal with them. Because they'll just loop you into this this sort of irrational sort of logic train of crazy town, right? And that half the things they're talking about are ludicrously not real. Like, and it's so ludicrous, how can you even believe that it's real? abortions happen after people are born, right? Like, you're like, what are you talking about? And people say this kind of stuff with a straight face. This is how Scientology deals with I think this is how the IRS thinks about Scientology, is they're kind of like, oh God, those people again, right? And they want to have like minimal contact, just the barest possible amount to meet whatever conditions they need to meet, to check whatever boxes they have to check, so that they just don't have to deal with them. I think that's how the IRS thinks about Scientology these days. And because nobody who's at the IRS now, I don't think anybody who's working there now even remembers what happened with the Church of Scientology back in the early 90s. That was a long time ago. That was 30 years ago. Over 30 years ago at this point. So who's there to remember all the specifics? It's just more, those guys. Yeah, whatever, I think that's kind of how they deal with them. I could be wrong, right? But I just thought, since that came up here, that I'd share those thoughts. Because obviously what the IRS didn't do when they went in and inspected all this stuff is find the actual crimes and prosecute them. And we know for a fact that they existed. We know they existed. Proof has been given to the people who need to have it that crimes happened in churches of Scientology when it came to credit cards and church parishioners. This has been documented. This documentation has been given to the people it needs to be given to in the FBI. I know this for a fact. And they haven't done shit about it. Except these inspections, which were whatever. Right? That's all I know, is that they happened. I don't know exactly what they did. I don't know exactly why they were called in there. And I don't know what it was that they were looking for specifically. But what I do know is that whatever it was they found, and whatever it was that happened as a result of that, right? That's what we've got. So, I'm not super happy about, how the IRS deals with cults. That they're really bad at it. Really bad. And, so that's what I can say about that. You're going to get a little of my angst on that one, Okay, frustrated atheist. Have you ever? I'm really happy today to see some questions from some new folks today. Thank you for chiming in on this. I love Xenu and Red Pill and you other guys. No hit on you at all, but I'm happy to see other questioners today. Have you ever thought that you became an atheist due to your Thetan levels? Checkmate atheists. I'm not sure I understand that, but I don't think me becoming an atheist has a whole lot to do with my Thetan levels, just so you know. Okay. Yes. Did you see that during a recent Friends in High Places podcast episode that John Stamos claimed the Church of Scientology kicked me out for being too annoying at age 17? I did see that. I saw a few headlines about that. I didn't click into it because I pretty much figured from what he was saying that I kind of got what the message was without having to get in all the details, and it wasn't, But yes, I did see that, and I am sure that's true. There are some, and that was many, many years ago, of course, that John Stamos was 17. But yeah, I could see them not wanting to put up with a prankster, a jokester, somebody, kind of not taking it seriously. Remember, keeping Scientology working, right? These people are way too serious about their jobs in Scientology. So Stamos probably was a breath of fresh air, and they weren't into it. All right, let's see what else we've got here. Oh, wonderful questions. Okay, David Miscavige asks me, Chris Shelton, the time has come to confront this vital inquiry. Am I myself operating outside the technology? Do I possess the distinguishing trait of a squirrel, a fluffy tail? Well, I will say this. David Miscavige has absolutely altered the writings of L. Ron Hubbard in very, very significant ways. The entire Ideal Org program would be considered a squirrel project by Hubbard, according to Hubbard's own writings. The changing of a floating needle and needle phenomena and the way that the e-meter is used would have earned David Miscavige a declare order back in the 1990s. The changes to policy, the massive, massive change of the International Association of Scientologists and straight donations to the orgs or to the church would itself be cause for David Miscavige to be declared all by itself. L. Ron Hubbard's writings are crystal clear that you do not reg straight donations. In other words, something for nothing. You don't ever just take money from people and not give them a book or a service in return. L. Ron Hubbard did not mince words about this. There's no free service of any kind ever, right? You have charity auditing, which can happen. That's the only free service that can happen, Free Scientology Center. But otherwise, no free services, and you do not take money for nothing. You boom orgs, you get orgs operating by exchanging with the public, by selling and delivering Scientology services and materials. Now, that is L. Ron Hubbard's writings. I'm not saying L. Ron Hubbard was some, genius, wonderful guy because he wrote that, but it happens to be true that if you want to grow an organization, you've got to exchange with the public, not just be a vulture or a leech. Doesn't have long-term growth potential to just be a vulture on society, at least not the way L. Ron Hubbard was doing it. The way the guys in the stock market are doing it, that's how you do it. That has longevity. I hope you got what I just said. But in a cult, right, you got to do that, give something to people. Otherwise, they're not incentivized to keep giving you money. No Scientologist would give to the IAS as much as they've given if they hadn't first had the auditing and the training services that convinced them and put them in the headspace that, this is all wonderful stuff. So, point being, these are major, major departures from L. Ron Hubbard's writings. These are not small things. Every single thing I've told you is huge. And Miscavige just keeps going, right? He just keeps changing things. And so, yeah, he is the biggest squirrel on Earth. That's really, from L. Ron Hubbard's writings and point of view, that really is true. Big fluffy tail, big buck teeth, all of it. Okay. Carry on. What is called when a politician hears a question like, "Aren't you bothered by crime?" Then the politician responds, "I'll tell you what bothers me," and talks about something entirely different. It's called pivoting. If I remember right, that's called a pivot. You take it and nope, I'm going to go over in this direction over here. I'm not answering that. I'm going to answer this, right? And Politician 101, learn how to pivot, right? It's a vital, vital skill they have. Okay, frustrated atheist. Serious question. E-meters. What was it like using one for the first time? Did your brain make you feel like it was working? The very, very first experience that I ever had with an e-meter holding the cans was doing a drill with my dad at Pasadena Mission when I was about 7 or 8 years old. And I had no idea what was going on. And that was me holding the cans. And it was just a fun, interesting thing because a bunch of people kind of gathered around and watched. And I was the center of attention and I felt like the center of attention. And it was kind of awesome, to be honest with you. That was my very, very, very first experience with an e-meter ever. But I was not operating the e-meter. I was holding the cans and my dad was the one asking me questions to produce meter reactions. The first time that I ever used an e-meter was when I did the e-meter course as a public Scientologist in Santa Barbara in 1986 or 87. And it was a very short check sheet back then. It was like it was 1, 2, 3, 4. It was 2 pages stapled, but both ends, both sides. And that was it. It was just basically, you read a bunch about the e-meter from the e-meter books. You saw some films about the e-meter, and then you did all the drills one time through, and that was a certification for your ability to use an e-meter. It was really easy. And in fact, it didn't even have, I don't remember that it even had, no, it did have the dating drills. It had all the drills on it. It did. I did all those drills. And how it made me feel when I did that course. Oh, and by the way, I stayed up almost all night finishing that course on a Wednesday night. So we were doing those final e-meter drills at like 2 in the morning. I didn't really care. I was in it to win it. I was in with the spirit, and I was like 16 or 17 years old. I had all the energy that you could ever want, and then some. I was like a little nuclear power plant. So being up until 2 in the morning wasn't a big problem for me. And I thought it was amazing. I thought the e-meter was, I thought learning how to use this device was like learning to fly an airplane. It was a not easy skill that not a lot of people took the time to learn, because you had to really nose to the grindstone. Even for a short check sheet, I thought I was all that when I was 16, 17, right? So I was studying really hard, right? I had no idea what it was like to fly a plane. That's why I compared it to that. I now know what it is to fly a plane, because I had to get licensed to fly a drone professionally, and it's a lot. Let me just tell you, it's a lot. Way more than learning how to use an e-meter. But anyway, at the time, that's how I thought about it. So I thought I was the bee's knees, and I thought that I was learning a skill, and I had a device that allowed me to literally read minds. And man, was that empowering when I was that age, right? That's how I really felt about it. And I couldn't wait to learn how to use it and do auditing. I was excited. I was very, very excited about the e-meter and what I could do with it. So that was my take on that. So did my brain make me feel like it was working? I guess so. I guess I felt like my brain was working for once. Okay. Well, Xcion asks here, what's up with the Church of Scientology Dublin Director of Public Affairs, Diana Stahl, at a United for Human Rights event honoring Nelson Mandela? Well, that's just, positioning 101. There are very few people who are directly connected with the concept of human rights as Nelson Mandela. The man's name is practically synonymous with human rights. And so, of course, they're going to honor and respect him and others who have had things to say, like Malala from Afghanistan or Pakistan. Other significant people in the human rights world, right? I don't mean to embarrass myself by not even remembering her last name. But that there are figures, there are figureheads, there are people who are very, very much in the limelight when it comes to human rights. And Scientology wants to be on that train, because the more they're connected with human rights, the less they're connected with violations of human rights. And that's what they're trying to do. They constantly, from day one, L. Ron Hubbard knew about the PR tactic of hating on the thing that you're doing so that you make it, so that it appears you're not doing that thing. Right? L. Ron Hubbard talks about hypnosis in the first few years of Scientology, Dianetics and Scientology, and decries it and says how horrible it is and how awful hypnotism is, when in fact that's what they're doing in Scientology, is they're hypnotizing you. And L. Ron Hubbard wants that to be the last thing on your mind when you're in doing the hypnotism. Well, Scientology is violating your human rights daily. It's what cults do. All of them. So they position themselves as a leader and supporter of human rights. So of course we would never be violating anybody's human rights. We love human rights. And as I've said before, and it just, you know, butters my, what's the term? It rankles. Let's put it that way. Just put it that way. It chaps my hide, right? That some of the best educational materials for kids anywhere on this world about human rights are produced by the Church of Scientology. It's a travesty that is the way that it is, but it's true. So that's what's up with that. It's all positioning, it's all PR fluff, it's all bullshit. The Church of Scientology has no interest in human rights, but their members, you know, ironically, hypocritically, believe the opposite. All right. Oh, yeah. Leslie Bishop. Chris, do you believe that trusting your intuition plays a part in recognizing when you are in any type of harmful relationship, cult or otherwise? Yes, absolutely it does. Intuition, as far as I understand it, is basically the sub-awareness or subconscious processing of your brain delivering up information to you in the form of red flags, signals, hey, hello, kind of communications, right? Little alerts going off, little red flags in your brain going off, going, hey. Those alarm bells don't necessarily have a source that you can spot. So we call it instinct or intuition. It's coming out of the lower levels of your brain. Your brain is perceiving things in your environment, spoken, written, visual, auditory, taste, smell, whatever it is. All the perceptions are coming together and they are red alerting your brain at the lower levels below your awareness level. And when it comes up and says something's wrong here, that's why that is happening. That's how I understand the process. So it's not ghosts or angels or demons in your head telling you this. It's you telling you this. And you should pay attention to your intuition because it's based on your past experiences and understanding of the world. And the only thing you can do is mess up by following your intuition and then apologize if you were wrong, or go back and pay attention and fix it or whatever. Don't go overboard in paying attention to your intuition, but listen to it, right? Just because you have a little alarm bell ringing doesn't mean you have to break up right away, but interrogate that little alarm bell. What's that about? Where's that coming from? What's happening right now that I'm getting this red flag? Learn to question that and find out. Don't poo-poo it. Don't invalidate it. Don't say it doesn't exist or that it's stupid. But at the same time, don't give it all. It's just a red flag. Ding, ding, ding. Oh. Treat it accordingly, you know? It absolutely bears a role. And it's absolutely something that, okay, there's two things that happen, I believe, post-cult or post-disaster. Sometimes people have their red flags go off, have their intuition signaling them, and they ignore it. And they remember ignoring it. And then later on they go, I shouldn't have done that, right? And then they learn that lesson. There's other people, they didn't have any red flags go off, but they'll tell themselves later that they did. Right? There's some make myself right, you know, kind of thing going on there where they're like, oh, I knew it was wrong, but I did it anyway, because somehow that is a coping mechanism that makes it easier for them to swallow that they screwed themselves over, rather than just acknowledging they had no alarm bells at all and they just screwed themselves over, right? I don't know why, but I've seen that. I've seen it happen a few times in the last many years where somebody will say that, and yet it wasn't true that they had alarm bells going off. So it's interesting. People are interesting. If nothing else, man, people are really interesting in the way they remember things too. I just thought I'd comment on that. It has nothing to do with answering your question, Leslie, but other than the subject matter, but I thought it was kind of interesting to comment on that. Okay, Xenu, Primal Therapy, book, The Primal Scream. Did that influence Dianetics in auditing out the birth experience in womb experiences? Thank you very much for asking me this, because I get to tell you definitively it had nothing to do with it. Primal Scream was a development of psychologists and therapists, psychotherapists, who went completely beyond the bounds of their ethical guidelines on purpose. They knew exactly what they were doing, and they did it anyway. And they engaged in abusive group communal practices for about 15 years, if I remember right. They were finally busted in the 1980s. This was live-in communal pseudo-therapeutic cult. And rebirthing was part of the Primal Scream process. So was physical assaults, even some sexual assaults. It was bad. It was really, really bad. It was the very worst of what can happen when psychotherapists lose the goddamn plot and have their egos take over and believe that they have the sacred knowledge and line in on the truth through their therapeutic practices. They're not spiritual, and they're not claiming God powers. They're claiming that their methods of treatment are so great and so special and so amazing that everybody should be doing this, but it always has to do with centralized power to them, and they get to use that power to abuse their followers. This was Primal Scream, and these people ended up losing their licenses and getting kicked out of the profession, and having to pay fines. And there was a fallout that was the most extensive fallout that's ever happened with psychotherapists as a result of their malpractice. That was Primal Scream. That came 20 years after Dianetics was written. So if anything, Dianetics may have inspired Primal Scream, not the other way around. That's the chronology of that. And I happen to know a lot about Primal Scream because I studied it on the program. It was absolutely fascinating and horrifying. Really, really, really nasty, nasty stuff. And unfortunately, the motherfuckers who did that went on, they didn't go to jail, and they went on and created some other bullshit practice that wasn't, they could no longer call themselves licensed therapists, but they still got away with hoodwinking people. Really upset me. There was not really a super ultimate happy ending to that whole thing. It was just, it was all just kind of awful. The whole Primal Scream thing. Oh, great question, Joe. If you were an evil bastard and wanted to start your own cult, I know you're not and don't, where would you start with it in 2024? I would start an online cult. That's what I would do. I would totally do that from the comfort of my own home. I would do a Stefan Molyneux. I would do Teal Swan, right? I would do a QAnon. That's what I would do. I would go to places where there are mentally unstable people, or people who are not very good critical thinkers, and 4chan is a wonderful place for that. The old 4chan, I don't think 4chan really exists anymore, but you know what I mean, those sort of fringy, weirdo conspiracy places on the internet, and I would start developing an audience. And I would keep persisting until I got people listening to me. And it wouldn't take long. I mean, it wouldn't be a day, but it would be, inculcating myself, getting in there, finding out. First, before I even got in there, I'd study the environment, right? Find out what is it about this group that people, what do they like? What do they not like? I'd do the OSA drill, right? The assessment, right? What are the likes? What are the hates? What are the fears? What are the loves? Right? What is it that drives these people? And then I would start, feeding in stories or trying to present myself in a way that would attract attention and be interesting and put myself in a knowledge, leadership, authority position somehow. And then build from there. And I would be working to do... It's funny, I was just thinking about this the other day. It's funny you asked me this. I would be working to get enough people around me, following my work, right, to attract attention from more legitimate, more rational people. because I'm the pattern that tends to, here's what I've noticed with cults evolution or with formation is often they'll start with, not all the time, I don't mean to paint with too broad a brush here, but often cults begin with some pretty unstable people on board. And because of the numbers that it's attracting, it then will start attracting more rational people who the cult leader will then start one-on-oneing with to really, really work that line. I think of somebody like, the Seagram's heiress, right? Claire Bronfman or whatever, or some of the high-powered people that got connected with Keith in NXIVM, and how, when you got those big fish or the bigger fish than your regular small fry, regular crazy cult people, there's somebody here who can be like an inner lieutenant kind of person, inner circle. You're looking for inner circle people. And you want people who have brains. You want people who can think. You want empaths you can weaponize. That's what I'd be looking for, right? Is where are the empaths I can weaponize and really draw in? And I'd have to build up a little bit of a base first, but after I had that, I'd start attracting those kind of people. And depending on, what theme I chose for the cult, or whether it was spiritual, religious, self-help, therapeutic, what am I doing? I don't even know. It doesn't matter as far as this goes, but I'm just saying whatever the theme was, I'd be developing that, working on that, written materials, AV materials, that kind of stuff. A lot of interactive materials, things that are going to occupy people's time. A lot of mantra chanting kind of stuff. However that manifests, I'm going to be creating a lot of that. And and I'm going to build up that way. And once I start attracting some more rational people who can bring in money and bring in more people because they're now taking the lead and developing promotional materials, marketing materials, bringing in more people, this kind of thing, you start building it up. And as long as you don't try to take too much advantage too fast, gravy train. It's awesome. So that's what I would do. And I would start online, and then I would turn it into real world. But I'd start on social media. So that's how I would try to do it if I, had a gun to my head or something, because obviously I'm not going to do that. At this point, it would be a little silly, right? I'd have to go anonymous to do it or something, because everybody knows I'm this guy. But anyway, that's how I would approach it. Aw, Benson. Can I have a little dog-sized Sea Org uniform? Fuck no. I'm not putting a Sea Org uniform in my house. Are you crazy? All right, John O'Nolan, could you tell me what the Hubbard book, The Problems of Work, is about? I tried reading it thinking it'd have some interesting insights, but I only got a few pages in before it got really weird. Yes, sure, Jono. The Problems of Work is one of the public-facing books of Scientology. It's one of the more publicly acceptable books, and even as you mentioned, it's kind of batshit crazy. There is Hubbard apparently wrote the book or dictated the book while he was on an ocean liner journey over the Atlantic. And so it didn't take him long to do that. It's a pretty thin book. There's really not a lot in it. It's a few chapters. And it talks about, introversion, extroversion, and the idea of going out and taking a walk and getting your attention. If you spend all day, here's one of the things Hubbard advises in the book. There's a whole chapter on this. If you spend all day with your work about 2 or 3 feet from your face, like you work on a computer or at a desk or accountant or something like that, then when you go home or you get off work, you should dedicate a lot of your time or part of your time to doing the opposite, right? Having your attention outwards, away from you. That's common sense. That's like, oh yeah, that makes sense, right? That's not some like insightful, satanic, data from beyond. Taking a walk when you're feeling a little stressed, writing letters to your folks, if they're out of sorts with you, try communicating. I mean, stuff like that. That's what I remember from Problems of Work. Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's what else is covered in it. They've broken the book down now into a weekend, a 1-day seminar that you can go do at the church, and they'll walk you through the whole thing. They have a whole audio visual presentation and stuff that they do. So that's, yeah. I mean, not sure what else to say about that one. I am seeing. All right. Well, anyway. Let me do one thing really fast. I'll just take a second. Mel came home and Benson's sort of trapped in the room here, so I'm going to open the door and let him out. It'll take me 2 seconds. All right, here you go. There you go. All right, I'm back. Sorry about that. Okay. Yeah, I was just thinking about this show. Okay, let's carry on. Let's see what the, wow, it's already 2:25. Oh my God. Okay, let's do a few more here. Oh yeah, we've only got a few more anyway. Let me go over to the quotes page and pull up our other question. Gary Morris asked me, do Scientologists try to read people's minds and use it against them? Sometimes. Rarely, but I've seen it. I had a Scientologist tell me one time that he had to turn off his telepather. I don't know what a telepather is exactly. That's not a Scientology term, but you get the idea, right? His telepathic powers. He said he had to turn it off because he was constantly hearing other people's thoughts and it was annoying him. That was the most blunt conversation I ever had with another Scientologist about telepathy. My mom and I would play a game when I was a kid to stare at each other while we were doing the dishes and try to pass a thought between us. And we were pretty good guessers at that. We weren't anywhere near 100%, but sometimes we could get it. That was kind of fun. That was a fun game that my mom and I used to play it. Let's see. As far as use it against them, here's how this looks in Scientology. When you're getting your face ripped, when you're getting dressed down, a senior is yelling at you. If you manifest anything on your face that looks like resistance, disagreement, upset, confusion, anything other than keeping your TRs in and taking your beating, taking it, right? If you have any kind of thing, that person who's ripping into you is going to read your mind and tell you in no uncertain terms how fucked up you are for whatever it is you're thinking right now. That's about as close to an answer on this one as I can think of. And it happened many, many, many times. And I don't know that that's a Scientology specific thing now that I think about it, because I think of a few times when my mom or dad dressed me down as a kid and would do the same thing. And maybe you can too. Right? It's one of those times where you're sitting there and maybe you're not taking this the way they want you to be taking this. And so, you know, I can see what you're thinking, you little, you know, you're sitting there thinking no right now. Don't you, you know, like they'll tell you exactly what is on your mind. Right. And of course, most of the time they're wrong, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes they nail you. Right. And so, you know, so that happens. That happens all the time in Scientology because that's just people, right? In the Scientology context, though, it wouldn't just be people because, of course, if this person is an OT or, you know, whatever, Sea Org member where they think of themselves as OT, then they'll think they really are reading your mind, not just your face, right? But what they're really doing, of course, is they're just reading your face. Okay. Let's carry on here. Let's go back to the chat there. This is a really interesting question. Stuart Gorman asks, LRH was an author. Is there any evidence that he conceived of Thetans as authors of reality and that reality is just a work of fiction? You know, it's so funny because I think you just encapsulated Scientology. I think you just summated the whole thing. Because that's always how I thought about it. Once I learned what Thetans were and how they were explained to me and how Thetans create this universe, we all together, collectively, according to L. Ron Hubbard, you, me, and thee, are all collectively creating all of this. None of this would be real. I'm sitting here knocking on my table. None of this would be real or happening to us if we didn't all agree that this is what's happening to us. So we are collectively the authors of the physical universe. We are not necessarily the creators of the physical universe, but we had some hand in it, according to Hubbard, and we have an active hand in keeping it going. So, yeah, the answer to your question is there any evidence that he conceived of Thetans? Yes, he talked all about it. Yeah. There's evidence all over the place in Scientology of this. Is there evidence that's really true? No. But is there evidence that Hubbard said this is how it is? Oh, yeah, it's in take a look at the Philadelphia doctorate course lectures. If you want a one-stop shop for that, right? You can look at perhaps History of Man. I believe there are some references to this in there. Certainly there's references in there to separation from main body of theta and entrance into the physical universe and all that kind of stuff. But Hubbard didn't mince words about the fact that we are the ones responsible for all of this. Yeah, very true. Okay, Joe DeCeppo, further to that earlier question on gaslighting, can someone engage in gaslighting without being self-aware of it due to their own mental issues rather than purposely, or is that an inherent part? Okay. The way I understand this and the psychology of it is that there is 0% chance that somebody is going to gaslight you by accident. But they might not tell themselves the story that they are gaslighting you. They may tell themselves a different story about what they're doing. Narcissistic predators have all kinds of wild flights of fancy as to why they do what they do. They do. They sell themselves on being the hero of their story, just like every human does. It's essential. It's a core element of being human. You're the hero of your story. Now, people misinterpret this a lot. What I mean by that is that they are the main character, the protagonist of their story. That doesn't mean they're always engaged in heroic acts and they see themselves as the good guy all the time. People misunderstand my statement. So let me clarify, right? When I say you're the hero of your own story, I mean the protagonist. But a lot of people don't know what the hell protagonist means, so I use hero. But I don't mean you're the heroic hero. You're the central figure of your own narrative. You are always right at the source of everything happening to you according to you. So you're going to spin whatever story you're going to spin to yourself, and predators do the same thing. That's all I'm saying by that. So I can't get into a predator's head 100% of the time and tell you, oh yeah, they know exactly that they're acting in this vicious, evil way to deny your reality. They could be telling themselves that they are correcting you because you're an ignorant fool who can never get it right. And look at how many times you screw up daily. And I got to correct you, and I got to go out of my way to do it. And this might be how they talk to themselves and talk to you when they're gaslighting you. They're not thinking, I'm gaslighting him. He's almost there, right? Or she's almost under, they don't always think like that. Sometimes they do. Sometimes they know exactly what they're doing. I'll say a lot of the time they know exactly what they're doing. But human beings are variable, complicated beings. So, so you get that. But I do want to be clear. I want to be really, really clear about the fact that whatever story they're telling themselves, what they're doing, and the reason they're doing it are not for your benefit. And they don't think that it is. They're not that delusional, right? They know they're hurting you. They know they're messing with you. They know you're wrong and they are right. They're 100% certain of that. So their efforts to correct you, right, could well look like a gaslighting campaign. It's the only way they know how to interact with you and adjust your behavior, is to do it in an overwhelming, dominating fashion, and, you know, and ruin your mind in the process. But it's never an accident, and it's never just happenstance. Gaslighting is always purposeful. Okay, John O'Nolan, do you think a lot of long-term public Scientologists would be thinking, yeah, we're struggling when it comes to membership, or would they just ignore what they see and believe they're booming? No, it's both at the same time, and that's the crazy weird part. Here's the funny thing. We talk about these in either ors, but what we really should be talking about them as is both at the same time being jammed together, and the cognitive dissonance forces it to make sense. They're hyper aware of the fact that their orgs are empty. Scientologists are not stupid people. They walk into their orgs, their ideal orgs, they've paid millions of dollars for these things, and they see nobody's there. They see no boom happening, no expansion happening. They go on the internet, they Google Scientology, they see nothing but body Thetans and Xenu and abuses and child molestation, and they're like, Jesus, what the fuck, right? Where's all the wins? This is what I used to do when I went on the internet, is where's all the wins? How come we're not, you know, properly represented here? Well, they might, that's how they think, is that all of this is all the bad SP horrible stuff. Where's all the good stuff? Because we know, as a Scientologist, I know that there's all this good stuff and it exists. And this is the struggle. This is the conflict that they're experiencing all the time, is the conflict between, I know it's wonderful and great and should be taking over the world, and yet, you know, this place is empty and nothing's really happening here, right? And that is their struggle. That's their dissonance to solve and deal with. And they all do it in slightly different ways, which is why you get such a variety of experience with Scientologists explaining what, you know, why the org is not, why it's not succeeding. And ultimately, in the end, the answer to the question is that they do just ignore what's going on, and they just kind of keep going. But it's not quite the you know, the sort of, I don't see it, I don't hear it, therefore it doesn't exist. You know, they're not usually that locked up on it, you know. They can see things are wrong. They just don't know why, and they invent some reason, and it doesn't have anything to do with them anyway. They're public Scientologists. They're not working at the church. You know, it's up to the staff to figure that out. So, yeah. Okay. All right, this looks like the last question, and then we might look at wrapping up here today. Stuart asks, are thoughts physical objects? As I understand it, our brain is divided up into lots and lots of different regions that serve different functions, some of which we're still right deep in the middle of figuring out. A lot of it we're still figuring out. But there are different brain regions that work together in multitudinous ways. There's a lot of multitasking going on at all levels of the body. The same chemicals are doing different things in different places for different reasons. Different neurotransmitters have different purposes for different things at different times, right? But they're all working in this sort of orchestrated symphony of keeping you alive, keeping you predicting what's going to happen in the world, and keeping you one step ahead of that. And the thoughts that you have are patterns or relays of neural responses, right? Neurons flying around in your brain. and they go along different pathways and they set different states. And like a computer, I guess, although it's organic, so it's different than a computer, but we can analogize to a computer in terms of off and on states. Neurons are not off on states, but there's it's the only analogy I can draw, where you have billions and billions and billions of connections up here. And the amount of variety of combinations of things you can do, therefore, that will set different states or create different things in the brain are what drives what creates that thing we call thinking, or the sensation of thinking or of having thoughts. Me sitting here moving my hand the whole time I'm talking to you is another part of my brain that's activated back here, right? There's the eye stuff here and there's motion stuff back here. And that's what's driving this to happen, my hand to move while I'm doing that. There's thoughts happening there, but I'm not even aware of them. But they're physically happening. Neurons are moving around. Neurochemicals are moving around. Things are changing in my brain, in other words, and as a result of that, and other changes in my body, my neural network and my muscle tissue and my hormones and all that stuff, right, drives, again, it's a symphony of activity that results in the sensation of me having thoughts. That's as much as we've got on it right now, at least as far as I can tell. That's as much as I know about it. And that is, and that's all neuroscience stuff. And they got names and figure outs and all kinds of stuff for this. The brain is just so goddamn complicated. So the bottom line answer to your question is yes, thoughts are physical objects. They are things that happen in the physical world. There is no need for a spiritual connection, non-physical, metaphysical connection or existence or dualism, you know, with some non-physical aspect of us. That doesn't have to exist in order to explain what's happening with us. If it exists extra to us, and there's no way to sense, measure, or test it. So within the bounds of what we can sense and measure and test, everything seems to be pretty explainable by all the elements that I laid out here. The other thing that I wonder about, though, in terms of thoughts being physical objects, is the influence on our thoughts of action and others around us, because but it can always go back to an individual and the individual's perceptions and reactions to their perceptions. Like I was thinking about, you know, you walk into a room and it's a little quiet and you kind of know everybody's been talking about you. But those are really just cues you're picking up from the way people are looking at you and the sounds and the gestures and the attitudes. It's, again, that intuition acting, right? You're putting things together at a subconscious level, and then the conscious level just gets something ain't right here, you know, but you're not necessarily aware of all the specific things that are telling you that. You just get this high level executive thought, something ain't right. They're talking about me, right? And maybe they are and maybe they aren't, right? But is your perception of it. So I was thinking about that in terms of influence on your thinking, but really in the end, it comes down to, you know, if thoughts are happening in your head, it's because, you know, neurons are moving around and activity is happening up there, and that's all physical. So there you go. Okay, that's all I got. Oh, okay. I do see a super chat here in the regular comments. Bo Beats Black Sheep. Can the internet cause paranoia and or delusion? Yes. I think flat earthers and QAnon are a brilliant example of that. Yeah. Yes, it can. All the same tactics, all the things that we talk about, right? Loaded language, sacred science, right? All the things that you do to engage in thought reform with people, you can do on the internet. And when they grab and take hold and go down the rabbit hole, so to speak, people can self-radicalize, they can self-cultize, so to speak, online. Yes, that absolutely happens. Okay, cool. All right. So I think that's it for the day. I think we'll wrap up. We've only been at it for almost 2 hours. Kind of fun. I thought I caught all the questions here. Let me make sure. Red Pill asked if Red Pill sent in a question. I don't see a Red Pill question in the list here today. In the chat box, I don't see it. Oh yes, Bo Bleach Black Sheep. I am concerned about someone on the fringes of our community who seems to be suffering from paranoia and delusional thoughts. Could this be caused by too much time on the internet, in your opinion? Absolutely it could. Yes, 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 yes. No reason why not, right? The internet basically represents human influence. And so if you spend too much time with a cult leader in person, or you spend too much time with a predator or manipulator online, you can get the very same result. In person tends to be faster, easier, more impinging, more real to the person. So it tends to happen faster in real life than it will online. But it depends, results may vary. It depends on who you're talking about and, how stable they are to begin with. So yeah, right. If you're concerned, you probably have reason to be. And yes, being online can absolutely exacerbate conditions that are already there. Someone is not going to develop a personality disorder just by reading stuff on the internet. Let's be clear about that, though. Personality disorders generally have genetic components or physical components or other things added to them as to why they're happening. It's not just I read some stuff and I went crazy. So I don't want anybody walking away thinking that. But you can get into some insanely crazy headspaces by being riled up and exacerbating a condition that already exists. If you got a bipolar situation, a paranoid delusion situation, an ADHD situation or whatever, you can affect that person or activate that person's issues with information, with imagery, with, thought-terminating cliches, with loaded language, with misinformation or disinformation designed to rile up emotions. All of these tools are at your disposal for online manipulation. It's nasty, nasty stuff, right? And generally speaking, there's a lot of people out there who, well, there's percentages of people out there. And when we talk about, 1% of the population, we're talking about millions and millions of people. And they're susceptible to this more so than other people. That happens. Yeah, it's definitely a real thing. Okay, good. All right. So that's what we got. Let's take that off the screen. And yeah. Okay, guys. Thanks for coming around. Again, I will wrap up the show today by asking again, please like, share, tell people about me, My channel has so much good stuff on it for people who are looking for help. And I just want them to find it. That's actually all I really want out of this. So help me in that, okay? All right. So with that, thanks, guys. Bye-bye.